She never planned to stay the night until he closed the door and didn't let her leave. She never planned to stay the night. That was the only thing keeping her calm as she stepped out of the elevator and walked down the quiet hallway. 5 minutes. That's all she told herself. 5 minutes to return what she'd borrowed, say a polite goodbye, and leave before the air between them grew heavy with things neither of them had ever said out loud. 5 minutes was safe. Anything longer was. Nora Hayes stopped outside the door and exhaled slowly, fingers tightening around the small canvas bag hanging from her shoulder. Inside, it was the leather notebook she'd left behind a week ago, the one she'd been looking for everywhere until she'd realized exactly where it must be, with him. She knocked once. The door opened almost immediately. Caleb Rowan stood there like he'd been waiting, not dressed for company, not rushed, just calm, familiar, and unfairly steady in a way that made her chest tighten before she even stepped inside. "Nora," he said quietly. "Hi," she replied, hating how small the word sounded. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he stepped aside. "Come in." She hesitated just a fraction of a second before crossing the threshold. That was mistake number one. His apartment hadn't changed, minimal, clean. Warm in a way that felt lived in rather than staged. The lights were low, the windows dark with the early evening sky threatening rain. She held up the bag. "I think this is yours, or was mine, I mean." He took it gently from her hand. Their fingers brushed. She pulled back immediately. "Thank you," he said. "I was going to drop it off." "It's fine," she replied quickly. "I was already nearby," a lie but a harmless one. She glanced at the clock on the wall. 5 minutes, she could do this. "I should go," she added. Caleb didn't argue, he just nodded. "Of course." That should have made it easier. It didn't. She turned toward the door, then stopped when thunder cracked outside, sharp and sudden. Rain followed immediately, slamming against the windows like it had been waiting for permission. Nora winced. "That was fast." Caleb glanced outside. "Storm warning came through earlier." Of course it did. She reached for the door handle anyway. The building lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. Darkness swallowed the room, her breath caught. A second later, soft emergency lights flickered on in the hallway beyond the door. Caleb was already moving. "Hey," he said calmly, "it's okay." She hadn't realized she'd frozen until his voice reached her. "I'm fine," she said too quickly. "I know," he replied, "I just meant don't rush." He closed the door gently, not locking it, not blocking her, just closing it. The sound echoed louder than it should have. "You can wait it out," he added. "If you want, the storm won't last long." There it was, the option, the choice. She looked at the door. Then back at him. "I don't want to impose." "You're not," he said. "And if you want to leave, I'll walk you down." The sincerity in his voice undid something in her chest. She nodded once. "Just until the rain slows." 5 minutes, she reminded herself. They sat on opposite ends of the couch, distance carefully maintained. The rain grew louder, drumming against the windows, filling the space between them with a sound that felt intimate despite its violence. "So," Nora said, clasping her hands together. "How have you been?" Caleb smiled faintly. "Alive, busy." "Same answer as always." She laughed softly. "Figures." Silence followed, but it wasn't uncomfortable, just aware. "You left in a hurry last time," he said gently. Her shoulders stiffened. "I had to." "I know." He didn't ask why. That made it worse. "I didn't plan to stay then either," she admitted before she could stop herself. His gaze softened, but he didn't move closer. "I never assumed you would," he said. Thunder rolled again. Nora glanced at the door, then back at the couch. The storm showed no signs of slowing. Caleb stood. "I'll make some tea." She hesitated, then nodded. "Okay." As he moved into the kitchen, she let herself breathe. This wasn't dangerous. This wasn't dramatic. This was just weather, just timing, just circumstance. She could leave any time. That mattered. Caleb returned a minute later with 2 mugs, setting one down near her without comment. Steam curled upward, warm and grounding. "Thank you," she said. "Of course." Their fingers brushed again when she picked it up. Neither of them pulled away this time. The power flickered once more. Then stabilized. The clock ticked on. 5 minutes passed. then 10. Nora stared into her mug, heart steady but full in a way she hadn't expected. I should check the rain, she said. Caleb nodded. I'll walk you to the window. They stood side by side watching the storm paint the glass in streaks of silver. It doesn't look like it's letting up, she murmured. No, he agreed. It doesn't. She swallowed. I never meant to stay this long. He looked at her, not with expectation, not with pressure. Just honesty? I know, he said. Outside, the rain fell harder. Inside, the door remained closed. And for the first time since she'd knocked, Nora realized something unsettling. She hadn't stayed because she couldn't leave. She stayed because, for reasons she wasn't ready to name, she hadn't wanted to. The storm didn't ease. If anything, it grew heavier, rain pounding harder against the windows, wind rattling faintly through the building like a reminder that the world outside was very far away. Nora checked her phone for the third time. No signal, she frowned. Of course. Caleb leaned against the counter, mug in hand. The building's like a bunker during storms. That's reassuring, she said dryly. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. You can still leave if you want, I'll walk you down. She looked at him, really looked. He wasn't blocking the door, wasn't standing between her and freedom. If anything, he looked like he was bracing himself for her to say yes. I'll wait a bit, she said. His shoulders relaxed just slightly. Okay, that was it. No persuasion, no relief spoken out loud, just acceptance. They moved around each other carefully like people relearning shared space. Caleb rinsed the mugs. Nora hovered near the bookshelf, running her fingers along the spines she remembered too well. You still have these, she said softly, pulling one out. Some habits stick, he replied. She smiled faintly. You always said you'd get rid of the sad poetry. I tried, he admitted. Didn't work. The power flickered again, then settled. The apartment felt warmer now, quieter, wrapped in the sound of rain and low city hum. Caleb gestured toward the couch. You can get comfortable. I'll grab a blanket. I'm fine, she said automatically. He paused, then nodded. All right, he didn't insist. That was becoming a pattern. They sat again, closer this time, but still not touching. The space between them felt deliberate, almost sacred. So, Nora said, breaking the silence. Is this weird for you? He considered the question. Yes, she laughed softly. Good, me too. But not bad, he added, just unexpected. She nodded. That was the word, unexpected. Minutes passed, then longer. They talked about safe things at first, work, mutual friends. The neighborhood changing too quickly, conversations that skimmed the surface but never dipped too deep. Still, the undercurrent was there. The things they didn't say pressed gently at the edges. I never meant to disappear, Nora said suddenly. Caleb's head lifted. I know, you don't, she said, not really. He turned toward her fully now, expression open but guarded. You left because staying would have meant something you weren't ready for. Her breath caught. That's not, she stopped, exhaled. Maybe it is. Silence settled again, heavier this time. I didn't close the door to trap you, he said quietly, her eyes lifted to his. I know, she replied. He hesitated, then continued. I closed it because I didn't want the storm deciding for you. Something in her chest tightened. You always did that, she murmured. Gave me room, and you always ran when it felt like too much, he said gently. She laughed softly, tears threatening. Fair. Thunder rolled again, closer now. Nora drew her knees up onto the couch, hugging them loosely. Without thinking, Caleb shifted, angling himself slightly toward her, presence warm and grounding without crossing the line. You're shaking, he noted. It's cold, she lied. He stood immediately. I'll grab the blanket. This time she didn't protest. He draped it over her shoulders carefully, his fingers brushing her collarbone for half a second longer than necessary. She looked up at him. He froze. You okay? He asked. Yes, she whispered. He sat back down but closer now. Their arms almost touched. The blanket pooled between them, shared. That's how it starts, Nora said quietly. How what starts? This, she said, staying longer than planned. Caleb's voice was steady. You're still choosing. She swallowed. That's what scares me. Hours passed unnoticed. The storm raged outside, but inside the apartment, time softened, conversation slowed. Silence grew comfortable. At some point, Nora leaned back, head resting against the couch cushion. Caleb mirrored her posture, shoulder brushing hers accidentally. Neither of them moved away. She exhaled slowly, eyes closing for just a moment. "Don't fall asleep," she murmured. "I won't," he said. She did anyway. She woke to warmth, not startling, not panicked, just warmth. Her head rested against his shoulder now. His arm lay along the back of the couch, hand near her arm but not touching, still respectful, still careful. She shifted slightly and his eyes opened. "Hey," he said softly. "Sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to." "It's okay," he replied. "You needed rest." She studied his face in the low light, unguarded, familiar, achingly close. "What time is it?" she asked. "Late," he said. "The storm's still bad." She nodded. "A beat past." "Caleb," she said. "Yes, if I stay tonight," she began carefully, "it's not because I can't leave." He held her gaze, understanding flickering in his eyes. "I know, it's because," she continued, voice barely audible, "I don't want to feel rushed." He swallowed. "Then stay, no pressure." "No conditions, just permission." She nodded once. Outside, the rain continued to fall. Inside, Nora realized the truth she'd been avoiding. The door hadn't kept her in, it had simply given her the chance to decide what staying really meant. ACT 3 Why he closed the door. Tilde 1, 301, 500 words midpoint reveal, emotional truth, title meaning unlocked. Nora woke just enough to realize she wasn't on the couch anymore. The room was darker now, night fully settled outside, rain tapping steadily against the windows instead of crashing. The light came from a single lamp in the corner, soft and low. She was warm, too warm for the couch. Her body stiffened slightly as awareness crept in. She was lying on the bed, fully clothed, blanket pulled carefully over her. Pillow tucked under her head like someone had taken time to make sure she was comfortable. And Caleb was sitting in the chair beside the bed, not asleep, not watching her, just there. Reading something on his phone, posture relaxed but alert, like he'd been guarding a quiet place rather than waiting for anything to happen. Her chest tightened, she shifted and he looked up immediately. "You're awake," he said softly. She pushed herself up on her elbows. "How did I?" "You fell asleep," he explained. "The couch isn't great for your neck, I moved you." She searched his face for guilt, assumption, expectation. There was none. "You didn't," she started. He shook his head before she could finish. "I didn't touch you more than necessary." Relief washed through her, followed immediately by something warmer, something more dangerous. "Thank you," she said quietly. He nodded once. "You're welcome." Silence settled between them again, deeper now, more honest. She glanced at the window. "Still storming?" "Yes." "How late is it?" "After midnight." She exhaled slowly. "So I guess I'm officially staying the night." "If you want to," he replied immediately. The words mattered. She met his gaze. "I do." They didn't talk right away. She sat on the edge of the bed, pulling the blanket closer around herself. Caleb leaned back in the chair, giving her space even now. "You didn't have to stay awake," she said after a while. He shrugged lightly. "Didn't mind." "That's not an answer." "No," he agreed. "It's the truth." Her heart beat a little faster. "Why didn't you want me to leave earlier?" she asked suddenly. He didn't answer right away. "I don't mean tonight," she clarified. "I mean before, weeks ago, last time." He looked down at his hands, fingers lacing together briefly. "Because every time you left," he said carefully, "you looked like you were convincing yourself you were fine." Her throat tightened. "And you were—" "No," he said quietly. "You were choosing what felt safer." She swallowed. "And you let me—" "Yes." "Why?" He lifted his eyes back to hers. "Because wanting someone doesn't give you the right to hold them," he said. "And I never wanted you to stay because you felt cornered." Something in her chest cracked open. "Is that why you closed the door earlier?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Yes." She frowned. "That doesn't make sense." "I closed it," he said, voice low and steady, "so you wouldn't feel rushed, so the storm wouldn't decide for you, so you could leave knowing you stayed because you wanted to, not because you had to." Her eyes burned. "That's not how it felt," she admitted. He leaned forward slightly. "How did it feel?" "Like you were asking me to stay," she whispered. "I was," he admitted, "but without pressure." She laughed softly, emotion thick in her voice. "You're infuriatingly respectful." His mouth curved faintly. "I've been called worse." Silence wrapped around them again. This one was different. It felt like standing at the edge of something honest. "There's something you should know," Caleb said after a moment. Nora looked up. "Okay." "I didn't plan for this either," he said. "For you to be here tonight, I know, but when you knocked on the door," he continued, "I realized I hadn't stopped hoping you would." Her breath caught. "I told myself I was over it," he said. "That I was fine with how things ended, but the truth is, I never stopped wanting the chance to do it differently." She stared at him, heart pounding. "And tonight?" she asked. "Tonight," he said quietly, "I didn't want to lose you again to bad timing and unfinished sentences." She shook her head slightly. "You could have said something." "I didn't want to trap you," he repeated. "I wanted you to choose." Tears finally spilled over. "You make it very hard to run," she whispered. He stood slowly, closing some but not all of the distance between them. "That's not my intention," he said gently, "but if staying feels like too much, I'll walk you to the door, even now." She believed him, that was the problem. "I don't want to leave," she said. The words felt terrifying and freeing all at once. His chest rose with a slow breath. "Then stay," he said again, "but stay knowing this means something to me." Her voice trembled. "It already does." They sat together on the bed, close now but still careful, no rushing, no claiming, just presence. Nora rested her head lightly against his shoulder. He didn't move, just adjusted enough to support her. Outside, the storm finally began to fade. Inside, the truth had settled. He hadn't closed the door to keep her from leaving. He closed it because he was afraid not of losing control, but of losing her. And for the first time since she'd arrived, Nora understood something clearly. Staying the night wasn't the risk. Pretending it didn't matter was. Morning didn't arrive gently. It crept in through the thin edge of the curtains, pale and uncertain, like it wasn't sure it was welcome. Nora woke slowly, wrapped in warmth that felt unfamiliar in the daylight. For a brief, dangerous second, she let herself stay still. Then reality returned. She was in Caleb's bed. Fully dressed, blanket tucked around her, pillow beneath her neck adjusted just right. Care, always care. She turned her head. Caleb was asleep on the edge of the bed, back against the headboard, one arm resting loosely at his side like he'd never meant to fall asleep at all. His face was relaxed in a way she'd never seen before, unguarded, peaceful, unaware. Her chest tightened painfully. This was exactly why she never stayed, because mornings made things real. She sat up slowly, careful not to wake him, and slipped out of bed. Her shoes were neatly placed by the door. Her bag rested on the chair. Everything about the room said, "You're free to leave." She hated that it mattered. In the bathroom, she splashed water on her face and stared at her reflection. She looked softer, less armored, like someone who'd slept without bracing for disappointment. She dried her hands, exhaled, and made a decision she didn't want to think too hard about. She would leave, not because she wanted to, but because she was afraid of how much she didn't. Caleb woke to the sound of quiet movement. He sat up immediately, heart stuttering when he realized the bed beside him was empty. Then he heard the door click softly. He was on his feet in seconds. "Nora," he called, keeping his voice calm. She stood by the door, coat on, bag over her shoulder. "I'm sorry," she said, not meeting his eyes. "I didn't want to wake you." He nodded slowly. "You're leaving?" "Yes." The word hurt more than she expected. "Okay," he said, just that, no protest, no reaching out. She swallowed hard. "You're very good at letting go." His gaze softened. "Only because I promised myself I wouldn't make this harder for you." "That's the problem," she whispered. "You make it easier." He took a step closer but stopped short. "If you're leaving because you don't want this," he said gently, "I'll respect it." She shook her head. "I'm leaving because I do." Silence filled the space between them. "Staying means risking something I've spent years protecting myself from," she continued. "And I don't know if I'm brave enough." Caleb studied her, pain flickering briefly across his face before he masked it. "You don't have to be brave today," he said. "You just have to be honest." She nodded, tears burning. "I am being honest," she said. "I want you, and that scares me." He let out a slow breath. "I know." Another pause. "If you go," he said quietly, "I won't chase you, but I won't pretend this didn't matter." She met his eyes at last. "That's not fair," she whispered. "No," he agreed, "but it's true." She opened the door, cold morning air rushed in, sharp and clarifying. She hesitated on the threshold. "This night," she began, "wasn't a mistake," he finished. "And neither were you." Her throat closed, she stepped into the hallway, the door closed behind her. The walk home felt longer than it should have, every step pulled her backward. She replayed the night over and over, the care, the restraint, the way he had stayed awake so she wouldn't feel alone. She had asked for space. He had given it. That was the cruelest part. At home, the silence was unbearable. No rain, no thunder, no shared warmth, just echoes. She sat on the edge of her bed and buried her face in her hands. "You left because you were afraid," a voice inside her whispered, "and one day you'll regret that more than staying." Caleb stood in the quiet apartment long after she left. He didn't move, didn't sit. Didn't reach for his phone. He let the ache settle where it belonged. He had closed the door to give her choice. Now he opened his life to the possibility she wouldn't come back. That was the price of doing it right. Hours passed, then something unexpected happened. Nora's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Did you mean what you said about wanting me?" Her breath caught. She typed, deleted, typed again, "Yes." The reply came almost instantly. "Then don't leave it unfinished." Her heart hammered. She grabbed her coat. Because some doors aren't meant to stay closed, and some nights don't end when the sun comes up. They end when someone finds the courage to come back. Nora didn't wait for the elevator. She took the stairs two at a time, heart pounding, breath uneven, not from the climb but from the certainty settling into her bones. She hadn't left because she didn't want him. She'd left because wanting him meant risking everything she'd built to keep herself safe. And safety had finally started to feel smaller than the truth. The hallway was quiet when she reached his floor. Too quiet, the kind of quiet that made doubt creep in if you let it. She didn't. She knocked once, then again. The door opened almost immediately. Caleb stood there like he hadn't moved since she left, jacket still off, sleeves rolled, eyes tired but alert. When he saw her, something flickered across his face, surprise, relief, disbelief carefully contained. "Nora," he said. "I'm sorry," she blurted before fear could reclaim her voice. "I shouldn't have left like that." He stepped back instantly, clearing the doorway. "Come in." She crossed the threshold again, this time without hesitation. The door closed behind her, not quickly, not dramatically, just enough to quiet the world outside. "I didn't come back because I felt trapped," she said, turning to face him fully. "I came back because I realized something on the stairs." He waited. "That every time you gave me space I mistook it for distance," she continued. "And every time you respected my choice I told myself you didn't care enough." His jaw tightened slightly. "I cared." "I know," she said softly. "That's why this scared me." She took a step closer. "I've spent so long believing love meant losing control," she said, "but you never tried to take it from me, not once." His voice was quiet, "because wanting you never felt like ownership." Her eyes burned. "When I woke up this morning," she said, "I felt something I haven't felt in years, safe, seen, like I could stay without disappearing." She swallowed. "And then I ran." He nodded once. "You did." "I don't want to keep doing that," she whispered. "I don't want to live my life in exits." Silence wrapped around them, thick, tender, honest. "Are you here to stay?" he asked. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Not because I can't leave, because I don't want to." Something in his chest seemed to loosen at that. They didn't rush into each other's arms. Instead, Caleb reached out slowly, giving her time to step back if she needed to. She didn't. His hand found hers, warm, steady, real. "I won't lock the door," he said quietly. "Not now." "Not ever." She smiled, tears slipping free. "I know." She leaned into him, resting her forehead against his chest. His arms came around her, not tight, not urgent, just enough to hold her there. "I was afraid," she admitted, "of mornings, of what comes after the night." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "Mornings are only hard when you think you have to face them alone." She breathed him in. "This doesn't have to be perfect," she said. "It won't be," he replied, "but it can be honest." She nodded. "That's all I want." Later, they sat together on the couch, legs tangled, the storm now nothing more than a memory. The apartment felt different, lighter, like it had been waiting for this choice to be made. "Do you remember what you said when I knocked last night?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "I said come in?" "No," she corrected gently. "You said I could leave any time." He considered that. "I meant it." "I know," she said. "That's why staying finally felt like mine." He brushed his thumb along her knuckles. "Then stay as long as you want." She laughed softly. "Careful, I might take you seriously." "I hope you do." That night they went to bed together again, no hurry, no assumptions. When Nora woke before dawn, the world still wrapped in quiet, she felt his arm around her waist, familiar now, welcome. This time she didn't panic. She turned carefully, meeting his gaze as his eyes opened. "You're still here," he murmured. She smiled. "I plan to be." He tightened his hold just a little, like a promise. The door remained closed, not to keep her in, but to keep the moment gentle. And as Nora drifted back to sleep, one truth settled with absolute clarity. She had never been trapped. She had never been held against her will. She had simply found someone who stayed long enough for her to choose to stay too.